My wedding was supposed to be a perfectly happy day where everything went according to plan. But no, it quickly turned into a tense family battle. Despite the clear agreement that this would be a child-free wedding, my two sisters unexpectedly showed up with their kids. When I tried to stand my ground, things quickly spiraled out of control. Shouting erupted, my mother was furious, my sisters fought back, and I had to call security to stop them. Afterward, they blamed me, my wife, and even demanded that I hold another wedding to fix the mistake. But what was the real mistake? And did I really do anything wrong? From the moment we started planning our wedding, my spouse and I agreed on one important thing. This would be a child-free wedding. We are not people who dislike children, but we believe that such a formal and significant event should focus on the couple without interruptions from crying, screaming, or disruptions caused by young kids. This is also a choice that many modern couples make, as it allows guests to fully enjoy the celebration without worrying about childcare. From the beginning, I made it clear to everyone, my in-laws, my parents, friends, and extended family. Most people understood and respected our decision. My in-laws were supportive, my friends had no objections, and many even agreed because they had attended similar weddings before. But things got complicated when it came to my own family. I have 3 older sisters, all married with children ranging from ages 2 to 10. When they heard that the wedding would be child-free, they reacted strongly, especially my mother. She immediately opposed the idea, saying, "Our family has never had such a ridiculous rule." It was true that at every family wedding in the past, children were always present, running around, playing, and making noise throughout the reception. But that didn't mean I had to do the same. I wanted my wedding to be intimate, professional, and free from distractions. My mother also argued, "Your sisters live far away. They can't just leave their kids at home alone." I understood this, but they had other options. They could hire a babysitter or ask a relative to watch their children for the evening. I even offered to help cover the cost of childcare if that was the issue, but they dismissed my offer, insisting that I was making things unnecessarily difficult for them. For weeks, my mother and sisters kept pressuring me, arguing relentlessly. It escalated into long, angry phone calls, guilt-tripping messages, and sarcastic remarks. I tried to stand firm because I knew that if I gave in to my family, it wouldn't be fair to everyone else. Other guests who also had young children but respected our rule. If I allowed my sisters to bring their kids, wouldn't other guests have the right to demand the same? After a lot of tension, they finally gave in, reluctantly. My mother wasn't happy but said she would deal with it after the wedding. I knew she was upset, but at least they had agreed. I even felt relieved, thinking that the issue had been resolved. But I was wrong to believe that. They never truly accepted it. They only pretended to agree while secretly planning to do whatever they wanted. And on my wedding day, I realized that I had been betrayed on the most important day of my life. I believed that after all the heated arguments, my mother and sisters had finally agreed to respect my decision. But on my wedding day, I was stunned to see them blatantly break the agreement. Everything at the wedding reception went exactly as planned. There were no crying children, no kids running around causing chaos. Every guest could fully enjoy the elegant atmosphere my spouse and I had meticulously prepared. Everything seemed perfect, until I saw my two sisters walk in with their children. I was shocked and furious. I immediately walked over to them, unable to believe that after all the arguments, after confirming multiple times, they still deliberately went against my wishes. Trying to keep my composure, I asked them why they had brought their kids when it was clearly established that this was a child-free wedding. But instead of offering a reasonable explanation, they started raising their voices at me right there in the middle of the reception hall. "We're family! How could you treat us like this?" Kids are part of the family too. What kind of wedding has no children? "Mom said she would handle this. You have no right to kick us out." My anger flared. I couldn't accept this blatant defiance. They had not only broken the rule but had done so openly in front of all the guests. If I backed down, wouldn't that be unfair to the dozens of other people who had followed the rule while my family got a free pass? I stood my ground. I told them they were welcome to attend the wedding, but the children could not stay. If they wanted to be part of the reception, they could either leave their kids outside with another family member or go home. At that moment, my mother stormed in, her face red with anger. She yelled at me in front of everyone. "You are so selfish! You're ruining your own wedding! What have the kids done to you? Why are you being so rigid? Your sisters traveled all this way just to be here for you, and you're turning them away." The guests started whispering among themselves. Some looked uncomfortable, while others stared at me, waiting to see how I would handle the situation. I knew that if I let my mother and sisters continue causing a scene, my wedding would spiral completely out of control. I had no choice. I called security. My sisters screamed in anger, but they had no choice but to leave. My mother shot me a furious look before storming out, dragging my father and my aunt with her. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly felt heavy. Those who had witnessed the scene stood in stunned silence, shocked that my own family had caused such a spectacle at my wedding. I knew they wouldn't let this go easily. And sure enough, things got even worse when I stepped out of the reception, checked my phone, and saw a Facebook post full of sarcasm and bitterness about my wedding. After my two older sisters and their children were asked to leave by security, my mother angrily stormed off as well, dragging my father and aunt with her. I should have felt relieved for standing my ground and upholding my principles. But instead, a heavy weight settled in my chest. I knew this wasn't over, and I was right. Not long after the wedding ended, my phone started vibrating non-stop. Message after message poured in from relatives, not to congratulate my wife and me, but to criticize me harshly. Why did you humiliate the family at your own wedding? Don't you respect your mother? She just wanted to have a joyful day with her family. Your own siblings came to celebrate with you and you sent them away? That's unbelievable. It didn't stop there. When I opened Facebook, a post was circulating within the family. The author? None other than a cousin who had never shown any interest in my personal life before. The post was dripping with sarcasm. I've never seen a wedding this terrible. The family was disrespected. Kids were kicked out, all because of some ridiculous rule. A day that should have been joyful turned into a complete joke, absolutely disappointing. Underneath the post were dozens of agreeing comments, mostly from my own relatives. They gossiped, criticized, and some even claimed I had lost my roots, was controlled by my wife, and had forgotten the values of family. That was when I realized none of them cared about my real reasons. No one mentioned that I had clearly communicated this rule in advance. No one acknowledged that I had given them plenty of time to arrange childcare. The only thing that mattered to them was their own feelings, their own sense of entitlement. They felt insulted because I refused to bend to their will. Anger burned inside me, but I knew reacting impulsively would only make things worse. I needed to confront my family directly. A few days later, I called for a family meeting. I wanted everything out in the open to make it clear who was truly at fault in this situation. Looking straight at my mother and sisters, I spoke in a calm but firm voice. Do you all realize what you did? I laid out a clear rule from the start. Why did you decide to ignore it? If I had allowed you to bring your kids, how would I have explained it to the others? They also have children, but they respected my decision. I expected them to deflect responsibility, but instead, an unexpected truth was revealed. One of my sisters suddenly turned to my mother and said, "Actually, Mom told us to bring the kids anyway. She said she would deal with you later." I froze and turned to my mother. She didn't even deny it. Instead, she looked me in the eye and said plainly, "Yes, I said that, because I couldn't accept a wedding where the whole family wasn't together. Children are part of the family. Do you know how much you hurt your sisters? They were looking forward to this wedding, and you turned them away like strangers." I felt betrayed all over again. Not only had they broken my rule, but they had deliberately hidden the truth from me, only to blame me when things didn't go their way. But what angered me the most was what came next. My mother, her expression serious, said, "Now you can make things right. Hold another wedding or at least a reception. This time let everyone come, especially the kids." I stared at her, speechless. Did she really think I would do that? A bitter laugh escaped me as I asked her a simple question. Where do you get the audacity to ask me that? I looked at my mother, waiting for a reasonable explanation. But instead, she just sighed and kept talking as if everything was my fault. You've embarrassed the whole family. Now you have to fix it. We are a family. If you truly care about me and your sisters, you wouldn't hesitate to throw another party to make up for it. I could hardly believe my ears. Not only had they broken the rules at my wedding, but now they were demanding that I throw another event just to make them feel better. I scoffed and shook my head. No way! My mother's face turned red with anger. She slammed her hand on the table and raised her voice. Do you not see what you've done? No one remembers your wedding for the joy or happiness. All they remember is the chaos you caused. I smirked, keeping my voice calm but sharp. I didn't cause that chaos, Mother. You and my sisters did. If you and they had respected my decisions, there wouldn't have been any trouble. My words were like a match thrown into dry wood. My two sisters immediately jumped in, throwing accusations at me. What has your wife done to you? We've never had this kind of problem in our family, and now you've changed because of her? Do you even know what the relatives are saying? They say your wife has manipulated you. A bitter realization hit me. In their eyes, I had no right to make decisions about my own wedding. Every mistake was pinned on my wife. They couldn't accept that I had stood my ground, so instead, they made her the villain. This isn't about my wife. This was my decision. I emphasized every word. If I agree to throw another party, then what meaning does my wedding even have? It wouldn't be my special day anymore. It would just be an event to satisfy you and my sisters. My mother threw up her hands, disappointment all over her face. So you're choosing your wife over your family? I looked at her, seeing clearly that she was trying to force me into an unfair choice. I had never made her choose between me and my sisters, so why was I being asked to choose between my wife and my family? I stood up, my voice firm. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm simply asking for you all to respect my wife and my decisions. You said our family bonds would be damaged if I don't fix this? Well, I'm sorry, but I don't see anything I need to fix. I walked away, but the story didn't end there. After I left, they turned their attention to my wife. They bombarded her with messages and calls, using manipulative words. The husband's family is important. Are you sure you want to break it apart? If you just convince him to redo the party, everything will be fine. We're giving you both a chance to make things right. If not, this relationship will be difficult to repair. My wife was put in a tough position, but she didn't waver. She told me she would not bow to their pressure and that she would not let anyone blame her for a decision we had made together. I realized then that this was no longer just about a wedding. This was a battle about setting boundaries and demanding respect from my own family. And I had no intention of compromising just because they refused to accept reality. After I firmly refused to host another party, my family did not accept defeat. When they couldn't persuade me, they shifted their attack toward my wife. In the days that followed, my wife's phone was flooded with messages and calls from my mother and sisters. They changed tactics, no longer directly attacking her, but instead resorting to emotional manipulation. Do you know you're hurting your husband's family? Think about the future. If you don't fix this now, you'll never be accepted. We gave you and him, referring to me, a chance to make things right. If you don't take it, then this relationship cannot be saved. My wife was placed in an extremely difficult situation, yet she remained steadfast. She didn't reply to their provoking messages and didn't react to their constant calls. But then something happened that made me lose all patience. One day, as I returned home from work, my wife handed me her phone. It was a message from my mother. If she refuses to persuade you, then she should prepare herself. Our family will never recognize her as a daughter-in-law. I saw red. They weren't just trying to manipulate her emotions anymore. They had begun using psychological threats. They wanted to force my wife to kneel before them, to lower herself and beg for their acceptance. I had had enough. I called my mother immediately. My voice was firm, my patience completely gone. Mom, I've been silent long enough. I've tried to explain, but you and everyone else refuse to listen. So let me be clear for the last time. If you send one more message like that to my wife, then you're the one pushing me away." On the other end, my mother was silent for a few seconds before she spoke, her voice filled with frustration. "Are you choosing her over your own family?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Mom, you're wrong. I'm choosing the life I want instead of constantly pleasing people who don't respect me." I hung up immediately. I knew that after that call, my relationship with my family would never be the same again. But I had no regrets. A few days later, things gradually quieted down. My mother stopped messaging, and my sisters ceased their attacks. But I knew that a distance had been created. They might never forgive me for not giving in, but that wasn't my problem. If love and respect in a family only exist when I obey their every demand, then that's not a real family. My wife looked at me, took my hand, and said, "You did the right thing." I smiled. I knew I had lost a part of my family, but I hadn't lost myself. And that was what truly mattered.